Welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Dialogue Horizon. In this episode, we'll continue on the subject of the economic and financial situation and the effect of the formation of the new national unity government after the inclusion of the signatories of Juba agreement. We will continue on this issue because maybe, according to what Prime Minister Dr. Abdullah Hamdouk mentioned, it seems that something new is expected to occur and to happen in Sudan, which hopefully will alleviate the deterioration in the economy of the country. With me in this episode, I'm happy to host two of our young economists who had important roles in different organizations, in private sector, in development, in the economic field. Definitely their views will be definitely useful, and because they have exposure to the first world, and they know exactly what happened in countries similar to the situation of Sudan, how they were delivered from imminent collapse, economic collapse. Welcome. We have our friend Bakri Osman. We are happy to have you here with us in this episode.
Thank you.
With your friend and colleague and my friend Jamal Abdurrahim Jamal Sabra. So both of you will try to cover as much as we can in this episode the expected, the present situation, the expected situation, and how can we circumvent an imminent economic collapse, what ways by which we can avoid. Anyhow, the first thing we want to discuss is the statement, the first statement, the inaugural statement of Dr. Hamdouk when after the ministers they were sworn in. He mentioned that he had a program, a political program, which includes in this program economic reform articles. That's why he formed about 5 committees to set this program. 5 committees. Although I myself I think it is done the other way around. It could have been, this should have been the first priority, is to put the program, your program, and then present it to the nominees of the cabinet. Those who accept it, that's okay, they can join, they can be on board. Those who have any other idea that they are not willing to comply and to abide by the program, but now a little bit is too late, because suppose that somebody, if you set the program has some contradiction with one of the ministers according to his political career, according to his ideology, according to whatever thing. So it would be very difficult to take him out after being sworn in as and nominated by, sometimes by groups, powerful groups. Yeah. Especially those who were nominated by the signatories of the Juba agreement. Anyhow, this program, the first question, which I think will go to Abdurrahim, my friend Abdurrahim. The first question that, as I mentioned in this introduction, that Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdouk, he mentioned that he nominated 5 committees to set a program, overall program on different aspects, including the political, the social, and the economic is definitely the priority. He said he wants in this program to put certain priorities so that they can reform or make some deliverance of Sudan from this imminent crisis. What do you think of on this program? Will it be something good and will help?
Speaking on the concepts of the committees, which was mentioned by the Prime Minister, at this point in time, there has been little information given on the structure of these committees, their authorities, their tasks. From an outsider's perspective, I would think that the committees are somewhat taken over or overlapping a role of different government institutions or bodies. which brings us to another question on the effect or the effectiveness of the committees, if they will be a cause of increase in expenditure or government expenditure, or they will have decisions that may increase the deficit or calls for more printing of the currencies. I do agree with you that the decision on having committees, it should have preceded the announcement of the cabinet, or more identification of segregated roles for these committees and the government bodies, so that we don't fall in the same loop again of having an overinflated structures or different bodies essentially trying to make the same decision, which causes a lot of confusion in the market.
Okay. Ustad Bakri, do you think, well, now you can add to what Abdurrahim said, but we want to ask you about the expected, or maybe the outcome of this program, the economic program. Now we'll concentrate on the economic section of the program of the Prime Minister, which might come up with some decisions or some recommendation which might contradict or affect the approved budget 2021.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on this issue of this possibility that the outcome of the committee, economic committee, might
Yeah.
make some changes on the 2021 budget?
Yes. First, let me start by saying that I think that the program, basically when we talk about the government approach for the 2021 budget, and also the new additions that have taken place recently with the new cabinet, when we speak about the government program, we're talking about a long-term program to mitigate the economic crisis, to basically, positively change the economy in Sudan. However, these subcommittees that have been created, they are formed of different ministries, and they aim to basically mitigate the short-term challenges. Problems as what we are experiencing with the bread, flour distribution, fuel as well. Everything from obtaining the fuel to the part of distribution. So I think the committees are formed to mitigate the short-term challenges, while the program is basically designed and implemented in accordance with the transitional period. So it's a long-term program. To answer your question whether there will be an overlap between the two, I think it is natural that these overlaps will take place, specifically when the committees start realizing, for example, that suddenly the country needs a certain amount of flour or fuel or medicine or whatever that is considered a necessity for the economy. It will definitely be of an impact to the 2021 budget. However, I also believe that now the Ministry of Finance, with the new team, with Dr. Jibril on the top of the ministry, I'm very confident that they have also ways and prepared to mitigate these challenges. One last point I want to say is that it's very important for these subcommittees to work very closely together, meaning that if the success of these committees in solving the short-term challenges would be highly dependent on the level of coordination and collaboration that they have work together to deliver these needs and services to the people. Other than that, it will be if that coordination does not exist, it will be a big problem, I think.
It will be a big problem.
Yes, yes.
So you are calling for coordination.
It's the most important
Because it
element.
will definitely the program, if it really it will change or do something on the airing economy.
Yes.
Definitely it will touch everywhere.
Definitely, yes.
So without the coordination, it will be a problem.
It will be a disaster, and I'm really worried to say this, but it is what we have learned also in the past for the last year we have seen that these committees existed. They were dependent a lot on many resources from the Ministry of Finance, but a lot of problems took place because of lack of coordination. And I think this is a very important lesson for the new government to learn from.
Are you optimistic that this, from the figures, the people now you see in the cabinet,
Yeah.
is this coordination possible?
I think so, because I'm more optimistic, because a lot of people think that transitions require a technocratic government. I believe that it requires both. I think in this government we have a very good portion of political experts and technocrats and people who have been in they have been in a long time in the opposition, people who understand also the country, and so from my side, I think the political representation in the new government will definitely have a positive impact.
Okay, that is good. Okay, Abdurrahim Jamal Sabra. Some economists, they say that the real problem of the country, or for this government, traditional problem, is something in the economy which was inherited for quite a long time, a protracted deficit of trade between the export and import, without any effort or endeavors to change this to a positive. For example, if we talk about the first 10 years when oil was explored and exported, at that time till from 1999 to 2000, 2014 years, there was no deficit, because the budget of the country was completely 75 or 80% dependent on the oil proceeds. That's what another mistake we'll discuss later, on the expense of other sustainable resources like agriculture. The export of oil was booming, and the export of agriculture was dwindling to this situation, which led, when oil was curtailed or stopped or reduced after the secession of the South, the government started the downfall till we reached this unprecedented value of the currency. So people, they think that this is something not only the responsibility of the traditional government, the previous traditional government or the coming traditional government, but they criticize that the government, the last previous traditional government and the new government will try to solve all problems which led, or factors which led to this economic deterioration in a package, in one package or in one budget, which practically cannot be resolved. So what do you think of this approach? First of all, you agree that we have inherited ailing economy, and will the policies of the government, this government, the new government, of trying to solve all problems at one time, will it lead to something positive?
Okay. First and foremost, I think we have to agree that the situation we are in is a combination of different factors, which brings us to the economic turmoil. Definitely, one of which is that we inherited an economy which was not at the best state from the deposed regime. But at the same time, we do have still structural and policy issues which should be rectified more easily by the current or the previous transitional government. So to answer the question, it is a combination of different things that were inherited and things that are more current now, such as institutional problems, policy issues, infrastructure issues. These are more clear in rectification, and we can say that we can hold the current government more accountable, because it would be more easier to justify an achievement or lack of achievement in these areas. In terms of the economic issues, it is unlikely that it will be solved in such a short period. And in fact, most economists would argue that all solutions are long-term solutions, and the short term is very painful. It depends on the different road that the current government or the transitional government will decide to take. But in any way you proceed, there is no short-term solution for the economic crisis. It's a long-term solution with short-term, let's say, gains toward achieving the ultimate rectification of the economy or of the entire deficit. So just to recap again, there's no long short-term solution.
What about the short term? You said something about the short term. As you mentioned, yes, okay, I agree with you that all the remedies, all the proposals will be for long term. People are talking about something long term when you talk about agriculture and the rehabilitation of Jazeera, rehabilitation of infrastructure. These are long term, I agree with you. But what is the short term?
I think the short term...
You said it is painful.
Painful. Yes, we know that heading towards economic reform involves ultimately a unified exchange rate.
Which is floating.
Floating, a unified exchange rate. And in order to do this, we know that it's not easy. It's very painful in the beginning. Having the right building blocks to be able to do this, which I think the government has not been able to achieve, or ultimately they would have done this from day one. In addition to that, it is a dangerously political decision to float because of the fact that it's going to be very painful or very difficult in the short term period.
Without having reserve.
Without having reserves, without having,
even with reserve, you have some a little bit of some problem. But without reserve, it will be a catastrophe. It will be disastrous.
Yes.
So this is a short. That is a painful remedy. What are politically can't you
dangerous?
Dangerous, but about the short term, how about the grants or assistance or from friendly people? When somebody is broke, sometimes his friends come to his rescue and they give something, or he pledges his house and he receives cash money. Is it possible that politically, this is something not economic, politically, can we resort, can we look to our friends?
I think this would...
It happened, actually, it happened. It happened with Egypt. You remember?
Yes,
if you remember all this?
Yes.
It happened. Yeah. That's why the revolution of Egypt stayed till this moment. So how about this political?
I think this would probably be the most viable option to seek, some endowment in hard currencies from neighboring countries or countries invested in the political stability of Sudan. I would believe that the government would already know that this is probably the most viable option to sort of shorten the pain when they decide to take this endeavor of unifying the exchange rate or floating, which is inevitable. Inevitable. But I think they are just trying to be in the best state to do, let's say, a managed float. They're trying to be in the best position to do this, even though until we are in the best position, it's going to be more difficult and difficult and difficult.
And you are right, and this is one of the major prerequisites of the IMF before looking into your salvation, how to salvage the economy of the country, how to help it, how to prop it. They first floating and subsidies. They have these two issues because they believe that subsidies are distorting the whole economy of any country. Because subsidies, when you make subsidies at large, without any condition, you are subsidizing rich people actually.
Yes.
Okay, Bakri, first of all, because this issue is very important, do you agree with Abdul Rahim that it is inevitable to float the currency? Number one. Number two, also you can couple it with the issue. This issue now is very sticky to the people, the floating and subsidies, plus the military economic institutions. Not only in Sudan, many countries like Egypt, they have military economic institutions, but these are not coordinated to help in the economy. So can you first talk about the floating? You agree with Abdul Rahim or not? It's inevitable. Plus, if you have anything you add about the military economic institutions.
Yeah, in general, I'm in full agreement with the floating of the currency and lifting subsidies. This has to happen. there is no way out of this. At the end of the day, Sudan is part of the global economy. And I know that, I've said that before, a lot of people, even in today's Sudan, are very critical towards organizations like the World Bank, IMF. But whether we like it or not, this is the situation we find ourselves in. And we are not in a place yet to start thinking about, reforming global policies. So we have to be very realistic about where we stand as a country. Floating of the currency as well as lifting subsidies has to happen. On the short term, I think that there will be a lot of possibilities of support. As I said in the last episode, for example, the family support program that is now being funded by the international community. I believe that also the government will have access to resources from neighboring countries, from states, as you refer to as friends. They will have access to these funds, hoping that these funds will help to mitigate the short-term challenges. So in general, talking about the floating, it's a must. I do not see any way around that. As for the state-owned enterprises and companies, I have to say it's a mixture. It's a situation that we have found ourselves in today. On principle, do I feel that it is a natural existence? Of course not. However, these are existing institutions that are a lot of investing in a lot of resources, and also there is a lot of dependency on these institutions. So in a realistic way, I would say it's part of the problem and it's also part of the solution on the short term. I think on the short term, what we can do is the best that we can do on the short term is to I'm not going to say to normalize the relation with these state-owned institutions, but rather to try and find a way of balance on the short term, so that we can reach basically a safe ground under which we can talk and discuss again how can we mitigate the existence of state-owned enterprises, especially when it monopolize or control a certain sector that have a strong impact on the private sector, on the economy, as well on other public institutions that are owned by the civilian state. So I think it's a very tricky issue. I think it's very complicated as well, and resolving it will take definitely a long time. But for the short term, we have to find a way to, because at the end of the day, if we speak on the abstract in general, there is always principles that we want to implement, but at the same time we have to think of the people. I think it's very important that every time we discuss an economic challenge, it's very important that we need to see how this will how this will impact the people. Now if you go to the streets, it's just very sad to see how things have changed. And I feel that we could do more in that direction.
Okay, Abdurrahim, can you have something to add on this issue? Because when we were talking outside, you said something about, as Bakri said, that the issue is sticky, this military economic institutions, and you said that they brought technology and they did something good, but it is confined to the army. But you said that one of the ways they can pay or contribute positively in taxes, in business profit, in so and so and so. Will that still you believe that Bakri saying that is a sticky issue? It's difficult to do it abruptly. All of a sudden that you decide and take a decision that you take it from the military back to the Minister of Finance, or how can we go about this sticky issue?
First, we must acknowledge that there was benefit from the military complex. One is technology. Second is that the providing of manufacturing, which is a substitute to imports. In order for, I think, people to be comfortable with their existence, there has to be proper oversight, because essentially it's a government institution. We have to be able to say that it's paying its fair share of taxes. It's contributing effectively to the economy. and it's been productive to the country. If we can tick these factors, then I think in general the public will be a lot more comfortable with their existence, as long as they are not threatening to the private sector.
Okay, that, having said that, there is an easy, a little not easy way, but something in between moderate. Both of you agree that the resistance of the military institutions, it added, they did something good, technology, they did something good, and at the same time it is very difficult to, all of a sudden, to take a decision to take it back to the government, because this is also a long term, because it involves certain discipline, certain norms, certain people, many people are in the military, but they can at least be directed to contribute like any investor to contribute. That's what you are saying. Okay, the new the new minister of finance, Dr. Jibril, as you know, he's a doctor also in economics, but also he has experience and he has been in insurgency for almost 20 years against the OSID regime, and definitely has some political dimension in his thinking. And so he said, one of the earliest things which he said, he rescinded the exemption of taxes from the NGOs, some NGOs, and the companies working on gas, petroleum, fuel, all this. He tried to do something on this by waiving the gas taxes on this, so they import without taxing. At the same time, he also rescinded and the concessions, which means exemption from customs, yeah, to some also NGOs. Will this have any effect on the ordinary people on the ground? The people now are suffering the hardship of the. Is this something sizable?
I think on the level of NGOs or civil society organizations, I mean it's a universal consent basically that these organizations or these institutions are tax exempted because of the mandate. It's not for profit. So I do not agree that NGOs should be taxed on principle. At the same time, I believe that when you speak about tax exemptions for sectors like oil and gas, it should be I think it should be the other way around. However, let's say, for example, if we take, for example, one of the major oil companies in Sudan, we can, instead of bringing the taxation completely down, because these sectors are quite large in the country, and they do have a huge share of the economy. So taxation is very important. But I believe that there are other ways where you can tax, basically the big companies, and at the same time maintain a smaller tax percentage the more down in the pyramid you go. So when it reaches the distribution or the distributors, it will be in a lesser amount. And here in particular, I'm talking about the gas. I'm talking about the cooking gas.
Cooking gas.
Yeah. So because and the more you go up in the pyramid, you can increase the taxation. I believe this approach not only for the oil and gas sectors, but rather for the entire business sector in Sudan. That bigger companies, bigger profits, bigger capital means higher percentage of taxation, and the smaller, because if you unify these taxation approaches, then it will also hit the small people. If if a startup company would like to, let's say, start a business in agriculture or in another sector, they will suffer a lot, and it will not be possible for them to pay taxes. So as the issue for taxation, I think it's not black and white, but it's rather something that we can, and I have a lot of trust in the Ministry of Finance, the team working there, the minister, that they will find ways to include these points, and I hope that it's really been it's going to be taken seriously.
Okay, having mentioned the taxation, the policies, how do you compare Sudan system taxation to other parts of the world?
It's a very good question because there are two main points regarding taxation in Sudan. One regarding the taxation policy, and then the taxation, basically the collection of taxes. Sudan has one of the lowest taxation policies in Africa at the moment. The taxation, the percentage of taxes that is taken from businesses is quite small already by default. Taxation, even in first world countries, is a main source of income to the state.
Yes.
The other challenge would be in the challenge of collection of taxes, which brings us back to the same to the very first problem that we spoke about in the very beginning of the episode. It's the problem of coordination. I think that the state has the ability, has the resources to collect taxes in a way that actually is efficient and effective. However, it's just a lack of coordination, because taxes has to go, it has to be, to implement taxation collection, it has to be in coordination with the state level government, it has to be with the localities, it has to be with the Chamber of Commerce, it has to be with the Ministry of Commerce and the Ministry of Finance, and yeah, so it's just a matter of coordination, I think.
That's good. So you are saying that's what's important, what we heard now, that Sudan taxation is the lowest, one of the lowest.
True.
In
Yes.
Africa.
Yes.
When you talk about America, it is something peanuts, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
But even in Africa, which is this a comparison, that is something people would like to know, that Sudan, the taxation, the brackets of that taxation on business are very low.
Exactly. Yeah.
It could
Yeah.
have been improved, but this is a good issue.
Yeah.
Okay, Abdul Jabal Sabra, we have another issue which is expected to be, or should have been one of the major sources of income to the of foreign currency to the country, to the Minister of Finance, which is the expatriates. Some people, they estimate that the expatriates of Sudan, about 15% of the population of Sudan, about 5-6 million in different parts of the world, but especially in the Gulf area where there is money, and the people, they estimate the expected reserve of these people about $4.5 to $6 billion annually. All of these 4.5 or 4 or 6 is channeled to the country outside the official system, the banking system. Why did all governments fail? They couldn't find a means of attracting these people to bring their reserves and their money to the country, because they have families, they support families. Why all countries, all governments, they fail to do that, compared to maybe other countries, which you can give a figures if you know of, like Egypt, like Ethiopia, like other different countries, where their expatriates, they contribute positively to the national income of the GDP.
Okay. When it comes to the issue of remittance, it is very important because essentially, as you've mentioned, the value of remittance can be very enticing or very high. It can be one of the main items which can be used to close the deficit. If we look at, like you mentioned, Egypt, annual remittance is over $25 billion. And if you take another perspective in a neighboring country like South Sudan, you see that remittance is 34% of the GDP of South Sudan. So it's something that has a large weight and should be given importance. I imagine that Sudan has not been able to succeed in channeling remittance through the official channels because there's several exchange rates, and the individual would benefit more by not going through the official channel. So essentially, we need to have a unified exchange rate once again in order to successfully channel remittance, and make sure that the cost of remittance is through the banking channel is more enticing than outside of the banking channel. I think North Africa is around 7.5% the cost of transferring money or bringing it into North Africa. So if we have a unified exchange rate and the cost of transferring money, let's say from the US to Sudan, does not exceed 7.5%, then we would effectively channel this huge amount of money through the official banking channel. So
from what you are saying, that one of the issues which support your argument that most of you floating is inevitable. It's the only way out. So one of the merits of this floating is that at least it's not all of the expatriate money, this 4 or 6, will be charged through the official banking system, because it is guaranteed, at least more guaranteed. Maybe some cases we heard of people, they did not receive their remittance from their parents or from their outside Sudan in Gulf area. But when this is one of the reasons this
Yes, of course.
enhances your argument that floating might bring few $billion, few, let us say 2, 3, 4, if people are skeptical at the beginning, at the onset of setting the floating value of the one price of that it will take time, but at least maybe let us say half. If you're talking to economy of Sudan, $2 billion will make definitely a positive effect. So also another issue which now we are talking, actually we are addressing the hardship, the agony of people in making ends meet, income and expenditure. Many people now, the poverty line, I think some people they estimate as 90% people under poverty line after this skyrocketing value of the dollar compared to the pound. The gap is widening, and people below the poverty line, it's reaching almost 90% of the population. Only 10% are still not in hardship. So some people, they talk about the free economy policies. Now we have a free economy policy inherited from the previous regime. When you talk about free market, means the control of the government is almost just there. But there are some other schools between, like in England, halfway between the free the market economy and restricted or by the government intervention regarding, let us say, the quality, regarding the pricing, regarding imports, regarding the concessions. So what do you think of this mixed economy? Will it work? Nobody's talking about it. People, till this new government, they are talking about the market economy, free economy.
On a principle, I want to say that it's really not simple for any government, I think, including the transition government today, to just sit down and say, okay, this is what we're going to decide in terms of what kind of market that we would like to have. There's a lot of challenges. If they decide to keep a free market policy, or they would like to change it to basically a monitored market, there will be big challenges in that regard. For example, pricing. Pricing is one of the things that even in a very simple manner, you go to two supermarkets, next doors, selling the same item from the same manufacturer with two different prices. And even though that the Ministry of Trade, for example, in the last year have already decided a pricing of certain items, but it was not really taken seriously. So the policy of implementing policy of market monitoring is quite important. So the question would be that would we be able as a country and as a government to actually monitor the market and set these restrictions or not? This is one big question mark, basically. The second part, which is to answer your question directly, whether is Sudan going to be able to take in new market policies and to decide as well on which political economy school they would like to take. That is something that I cannot answer. I think it will be very complicated for the government to decide upon that, because it does need a lot of let's say studying before deciding. When you look at countries like China internally it's quite mixed between a capitalist state and a communist state, but externally they are the most capitalist country. So it's very complicated, I think. I think this is going to be one of the toughest challenges for the government in terms of economic policy. The world is developing quickly, and it will take us really a long, hard work, basically, to decide where Sudan would like to head.
That's very good. Okay, Abdurrahim, I think also Bakri mentioned something which remind me of something very important. That the infrastructure, the poor infrastructure of the country is adding to the agony of Sudan, adding, as they say, insult to injury. But when you say, let us talk about the fruits and vegetables which come from places like not far away from Khartoum, from let us say Sinnar, from Lubayt, from hundreds of kilometers from the capital. But because of this poor infrastructure, brokers between the producer and the consumer, the chain, the dreadful change. I myself, I asked my watermelon seller. He said the watermelon, it comes from, let us say, come from Sinnar. If you go to Sinnar, if you go and pick the water, here he sells the big one about 1,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds for a watermelon. But the same watermelon, if you go to Sinnar, you might get it for 10% of this, or 100. So the rest, he says, this is coming because of the chain of brokers. So do you agree that the poor infrastructure, especially the roads and railways, is aggravating the situation of the agony of the people, because the production areas are not in Khartoum. Most of it is outside Khartoum.
I think this brings us back to the question earlier about the current issues which we can hold the current government more accountable for, which are policy, infrastructure, and this, like you've just mentioned. Definitely, we are losing a lot of value in the value chain because we don't have infrastructure, or we don't have the sufficient infrastructure to increase value to our local products, whether it's fruits or agriculture, or just simply being able to export efficiently. This we've seen for the last 2 years has become an imminent problem, and our neighbors will take advantage of this and add this value, let's say in Egypt or in UAE, which brings the end product to 3, 4 times, 5 times the value that we are selling for here. It's sold abroad for maybe 5 times the value because the value is added there. So we are losing a lot of value due to poor infrastructure. We're losing a lot of efficiency, and we're losing a lot of chances because local investors and international investors will not invest in a country that has poor infrastructure. It's very risky.
Yeah, when you talk infrastructure, it's only roads, power, water. This is also painful. This is very poor in some. But why the governments, since after the ousting of this regime, the previous regime, I'm worried that nobody's talking about the long term. You talk about the long term remedy. Long term. Long term is to increase productivity and production. This has to be coupled with infrastructure.
Yes.
Can we elaborate on this? No investor comes out, Abdurrahim ended his speech, that people will not be encouraged to invest in Sudan so long as the infrastructure is very poor. Can you elaborate on this, Bakri Osman?
I think this is a very valid point. As you said, the question would be that why these, for example, even if we talk about investors who are willing to invest in infrastructure in Sudan, companies that are willing to invest in rails, in lands, in roads, bridges, electricity. The question would be that to which extent do we have a political sustainability? This is very challenging. I think that's always it's always very important to elaborate by saying that economy and politics are actually it's the two faces for the same coin. If you do not have political security, political sustainability, then investors are not going to be coming to the country. We do see a lot of people coming in scoping missions, trying to see the ability to the potentials of the Sudanese market, which is something that we all are aware of. However, then the big question comes for these companies: are we going to be able to sustain ourselves if we would like to work on infrastructure? So I guess to answer your question, I would say that it's really related to the political stability of the country. And if one government can sustain itself, to give that sense of security for investors to put money in Sudan, that is going to be put particularly in the infrastructure. So yeah, I say it's quite political. Once we obtain that political stability and will, then these infrastructures could be invested in. At the moment, I do not think it's feasible, to be honest.
So, but the priority is now to make sure to set a stable system.
Exactly, yeah, and even
Stable system that encourages the investors to come.
exactly, and to do that, as we it's interesting that we always come back to the same point of floating the currency. This is one of the most important policy that is related to the economy. If you don't float the currency, you will end up having economic instability. That will lead into political instability, and then
Refrainment of investors from coming to
Exactly,
the country.
yeah.
So that is logical. I think it is very essential that this political stability, which once you get the political stability, you can go to the step of improving the infrastructure through investment.
Yeah.
We don't have money, but through investment.
Exactly.
But even if you grant or if you try to encourage to attract the companies by what they know is the boot, the built on operate system, hiring the land or the railway, also still no company, no international company will be interested to come to Sudan without assured political stability.
Exactly.
But okay, Abdurrahim, if you remember last two days ago, Sudan was visited by the State Minister of Foreign Affairs for Africa Affairs of Saudi Arabia, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And what in the surface appeared that the minister, he talked to Prime Minister about their intention to invest, to have heavy investment in Sudan in the field of gas, oil, and this kind of investment. What do you think of the importance of this visit? It is something genuine that the visit outcome will be investment, heavy investment of Saudi Arabia on Sudan projects, big projects, and if so, don't you think that it will be a good chance that you ask not a grant, we want something, okay, we will give you the land, we'll give you whatever you want to invest on, but at the down payment you pay on account, as we say in the banks. It might elevate. So this with Saudi Arabia, maybe with others. What do you feel? What do you have a feeling about this visit of the State Minister of Foreign Affairs for Africa?
When we look at the bright side of the visit, we may refer to the earlier also point on the exemption or the reduction in taxes for oil and gas. Again, I think maybe Sudan and Saudi Arabia are trying to capitalize on the short-term gains for oil and gas, as in the long-term perspective, we know that non-renewable energy will overtake oil and gas use. So maybe this may be smart to capitalize and maybe bring in foreign exchange and being able to have hard currency in the short term and capitalize on the market of oil and gas in the short term, while long term might be not as fruitful. On a large perspective, I think the first thing that may be looked at is Sudan's investment laws, because we are still not attractive for foreign direct investments. So this might be the first stages which need to be looked at or overhauled in order to make Sudan attractive for foreign direct investment, given that all the restrictions and barriers have been removed now, such as the U.S. sanctions. So there's a road which ends to all possibilities, and I think the government has to do the hard task now of making the country attractive for investment.
So what you are saying that internationally outside we are qualified. We are qualified because those sanctions, no state sponsoring terrorism, but internally we are not qualified to attract the investment, whether government or okay, we have few minutes to go, but my question about the measures, these measures, the security measures, which were tried many times,
Yeah.
regarding the apprehension of the dealers of the foreign exchange, and they go to the streets and they pick few hundreds of dollars,
Yeah.
and this has been tried many times. They apprehended many of the big dealers in this. They are known now to the security people.
Yeah.
But this didn't work. Never worked. On the contrary, sometimes it boosts the value of the dollar compared to the. Do you think the security measures are effective?
I don't think they are effective because it has these measures have been tried out many times before. Whether we like it or not, there is a need now for the black market.
Actually, there is a need.
There is a need. It's a need. It's unfortunate, but it became a necessity because without the black market now, where can people even who are importing, let's say medicine and necessities,
Yeah.
where can they turn to get the foreign cash from? So it's really important that I think that we understand this fully. It's a monster that
But you have to live with it.
exactly. It's a monster that exists. The only way to eliminate this monster basically is by creating a healthy system where people give incentive to people to say, okay, I'm going to use the bank and not the black market.
Okay.
That's the only way I think
That's the only way.
it can work. Yeah, exactly.
Abdulrahim, do you agree with what Bakri said about the measures which are repeatedly made inherited from the previous regime to this government? Now these days there is a big campaign on the dollars dealers. But Bakri is saying that black market is important at this stage. We are lacking. We don't have money. So this is the black market is sometimes helping in bringing life-saving medicine, like for example.
Yeah.
Do you agree with him? We have only 1 minute.
I would totally agree with Bakri that the measures which have been done and tried are, let's say, not effective. And I would close off by saying that if we want to know why the dollar increases, the government would be the most knowledgeable because they are the largest purchasers of foreign currency based on the needs of the country. And that we still don't have any economic mechanism to bring it down. So until we do, it's just going to continue.
That's very good. Okay, thank you. Both of you have been a very interesting episode, and it went very fast because the issues were hot, and that's why it went very fast. Thank you, dear viewers, for being with us in this episode for the last 55 minutes. We hope to see you next week in a different issue. Also, it will be definitely about the economy because we expect the economy issues to continue until people feel that they are having and they are enjoying a strong economy. Thank you, and see you next week on a different issue. Bye.